Hello everyone, welcome back to this series of Introduction to Salesforce Commerce Cloud, and in today's video we'll be talking about the page designer. So before we start with the page designer, let's try to understand what exactly page designer is and why do we need it. So far what we have seen is whenever we are talking about any of the web pages, be it the home page or the content page, where mostly the content is available. So those pages are designed with the help of content assets or content slots, or sometimes a combination of both of them. So for instance, if we talk about the homepage itself, here you can see we have multiple sections, and if I use the storefront toolkit for the content information, the top section that you see, the promotional banner, it's coming directly from the content slot. Similarly, then there's the header section. After that, we have this hero banner, which is also part of a content slot. There's a different content slot, which is rendering the category tiles and so on. So the entire page, you can see it's divided in different sections, which is being rendered with the content slots. And in the footer section, you can see it's content asset. So it could be anything. It could be slot, asset, or maybe a combination of both of them. But what exactly is the drawback of this particular approach? So if we go to the code, here you can see like we have to define the complete structure of the page in this template itself. Like homepage.isml has these many slots. As you can see, we have already defined the code. And then based on these slots, like the slot ID would be used, and that slot configuration can be updated by the business team as and when they need it. So one thing that we are seeing for sure is it has a lot of dependency on the code. So let's say down the line, if they want to have any new slot added or some new content they want to add between both of these, just after the banner image and just before the category tiles. So what we need to do is we'll have to make some change in the code as well. There we'll have to include one more slot or asset, whatever they want, and based on that the configuration could be updated. So first thing is it has a lot of dependency on the development. Other thing is it's not a customizable solution because we have defined a structure. So this banner image will be having this particular structure, and this slot is basically already in place for the templates. So it's not the scope of customization was very limited with that. So what Salesforce came up with the concept of page design, in which the development team starts working on different components, and those components are then provided to the business, and based on the type of page they want to create, or they can decide what kind of content and in what sequence they want to put it. So it's more of a drag and drop tool, which only needs the component support from the development. Apart from that, everything is customizable in the editor itself, which we get in the business manager. So that is the other thing. That's why the page designer was introduced, to make the merchandisers or the designers or the business team to have that flexibility of updating the content or design the scope, or like the design of the page themselves. So that was the primary reason behind having the page design in place. Now when we talk about the page designer, there are multiple terms that we'll be using. So first three terms that we are seeing is page, region, and the component. It's merely for our own understanding, like what exactly is a page and how that is divided into multiple regions and what exactly a component. And the last two terms, like the page type and the component type, it's basically so when we start working on the components, and we are working as a developer, so at that time these page type and the component type will be something we'll be using. So let's start with the first like the introductory thing for the page design. That is your page, region, and the component. Now a page could be anything which gets displayed on the storefront. So any web page or the storefront page can be considered as a page. So in simple terms, page is actually the outermost container which holds the every like which holds everything. So for instance, if we go back to the home page, this complete page could be considered as this entity, like the entire container could be considered as the page. Now in the home page itself, we can see that we have multiple sections, like the first slot, then the second slot, and third slot, and so on. So this is basically for us to understand, and it's to make it easy for ourselves, that how are we deciding the complete structure of the page. The same way that we are doing in the homepage.ysml, the same way we do in the page designer with the help of regions. Now regions don't have any like actual significance, but those are just for maintaining the hierarchy and maintaining the structures. It's just to make it easy for us to understand. So a page will consist of regions, and regions will have further components. Now component is the basic unit which holds the actual content. Now it could be considered as like the content asset that we use. So component is nothing but the most primary unit of page designer, which actually holds the content. And one more thing is like we can decide, we can define as many components as we want, and we can also decide what component should be part of which particular region. So for instance, in the first region, you can see we have two horizontal components with full width. Now the second region contains only three components, with one of them being a half of the width but full length, while two of them have half width and half of the length of the complete region. Similarly, the third region itself has only a single component, which is of full width and the full length of the entire region. So this is the basic structure of a page, where page is an outermost container inside which we have different regions to decide the structure of the page. Inside the region, the content will be held by the component itself, and the component, as many as we want, we can define. Now there's one more possibility, that inside the component we can again define the region. So let's say this particular tile that we are looking at right now, the left one. So inside it, it's totally possible to have a particular component. So this component, if we want to have component inside a component, that could be done with the help of region. So you'll have to define a region inside the component, and now this particular region can hold as many components as needed. So for instance, if you want to have two more components inside it, you can do it. If you want to have a single component inside, that as well can be done. Now the basic thing that we need to like understand here is, so as a developer, we'll be talking about mainly the page, like what kind of page we are trying to build, and the component, like what kind of component you want to support with that particular page. Now so again, when we are talking about the page type and the component type, so this is more for the developers. So when we start working on any of the page for the page designer, so these are the two terms that we'll be using very frequently. Now page type is nothing but it's an instance of the page. So when we talked about this outermost container, so because there could be multiple types of page that you want to design. It could be possible that we are talking about the home page, which is more content heavy. It could also be possible that we are talking about any of the PLPs where the product tiles are being included, and it doesn't have that much of a content, but like only the tiles are available there. Or maybe we are talking about the card page or my account section. So it could be any other page. So basically we need to define the type of page that we are working on. So that's where the page type comes into picture. Regions, as we already talked about it, doesn't hold any particular significance. It's just for us to understand and maintain the proper hierarchy. Now the component type, again, it's an instance of the component. So the component that we talked about is the most primary entity which actually holds the content. So when we will be working on the page designer as a developer, we'll be focusing on the page type and the component types. Now in page designer, when we are talking about either the page type or the component type, there are three very basic things that we need to worry about, and rest of the things are, it's completely drag and drop, so we don't need to worry about any rest of the things. Only three things that we'll be talking about is the meta file. Meta means the definition of that particular entity that you are creating, be it the page or be it the component. So meta basically tells the server that this will be the structure of this entity, be it the component or the page. And then comes the scripting, which is normally a JavaScript file, a server-side scripting, which tells the server, it helps the server understand the logic behind what exactly the server need to do with that particular meta. So now server has the understanding, like in the form of logic your server-side scripting, and it also has the understanding of what exactly the meta of that particular entity is. Third thing that comes into picture is about the rendering. So once the server understands, okay, this is the meta and I have the logic, what I need to do with this particular meta. Now the server need to understand like how exactly it needs to render, because the page could be responsive as well. So now, for instance, right now let's say if we are talking about the desktop. So this particular component will be having a particular width. And let's say if we talk about tablet or mobile device. So it could be possible that instead of two components, you want to have a single component in the first section. So that is the understanding you need to give to the server when it's actually returning the templates. So rendering it's the same as what we are doing right now in the XML. Only thing is that we need to define the way of rendering that particular page. We'll just start with a quick example. So right now, if we go back to the home page, right now this is the normal basic home page that we get directly from the code. So here you can see we have multiple slots, and okay, this is the decorator. Don't worry much about the decorator part. We'll be covering it when we cover the main coding section. Just to give you a brief of what exactly page designer and how it's working. So here you can see homepage.html is something which is currently the normal slot and asset version of the template. Let's say if we want to replace it with the page designer, simply what we need to do is, okay, one more thing is page designer previously when when initially it got introduced, it was not adopted by reference architecture. So we had to import or include a separate cartridge for page designer. But nowadays, like after I believe 17 version onwards, SFRA also comes with the inbuilt page designer code. So you don't need to worry about downloading a separate cartridge for that. You can simply have the reference architecture code setup as we discussed in the last video, and that's more than enough. So once you have done that, what you need to do is just click on the merchant tools, and inside the content we have this page designer option. Go there, and these are the out of the box page designer pages that we get. Now if I click on new, this basically tells you about the type of page you want to create. So when we talk about the page type, so this is what exactly it is. So right now we have, like, out of the box we get only three type of pages: your product detail page, product listing page, and the storefront page. So since we are talking about the home page right now, let's go with the storefront page. I'll name it as home page test. And the third screen that we get is, it's basically a collection of all the data that we have provided as part of the previous steps. If you want to update any value, you can directly do it here. So I'll just save and close. So this is the basic page that has been created. There are different sections here on the page designer when you look at it. Let's try to go with only the basic ones right now. So the header and footer is included by default. Inside this, we have these two sort of horizontal sections that you're seeing. First thing is the page structure. So when you click on it, it basically tells you about what kind of structure this page has. Like the storefront page that we clicked with, it has a header banner region. Then there's a legal notice text, and there's a main section. So the entire page has been divided into three regions with these three options. Now this number 0101 tells us about that only maximum of one component can be added in this particular region. And main region, it doesn't have any value. That means you can add as many components as you want. So let's start with the basic component here. You just need to click on plus, and these components that we are looking at, these are the out of the box components. We'll be talking about the components later in this video, but for now just take a look at what exactly a component is. So the component, let's go with a banner image. So the moment I selected main banner, you get different options here on the right side, which is about this particular main banner. So it asks you like if you want to have any image. So let's go with the let's go with this particular image. and then this text overlay. So we'll be going with and shop new link. So this is basically a category link that you need to provide, and how these fields are coming, that as well we'll be covering shortly. But just don't worry much about the components that we are seeing on the right side, as and just save and close. Once you do it, you see the structure of the page is visible like this. Now the image is a bit distorted, but you get the idea of like what exactly the page designer is doing is, we have this page in which we have multiple regions. Out of these regions, in the main region we have provided main banner. You can add header banner region as well. So let's say I want to add the promotional content here, and let's go with some images which are not already present on the home page right now. Okay, so this is the image that I want in the header banner region. All text, if you want to provide that, so it's an optional field, you can see here. Rest of the fields are also optional, so we'll just simply save and close. Now here you can see that it has added the header banner region on the top. Now all you need to do is just click on publish, and if you go back to the website, click on home page, and here you can see the top section and this banner has been updated now. How does code understand that okay, this is like whatever content that we are displaying, it should be coming from the home page, either the content asset slot combination, or there's a page in the page designer. So how does the system understand is, if you go back to the homepage.html file, so this remains the same in the code, but the controller, if you look at, so home.js is the controller which displays the home page. Now in the home controller, you can see there's a function show, and the first thing it does is it tries to fetch a page with ID homepage. If there's a page, so page manager.get page is basically responsible for fetching all the page designer pages, and you'll find this particular snippet of code in most of the landing pages. So let's say if you're landing on the PLPs or the PDPs, there as well page manager.get page will be used, and inside that it'll type the it'll define the type of page. So right now, as we have already created a home page, so what it does is it fetches the home page and renders that particular page. Now the moment I just unpublish it, and if I go back to the website and go to homepage, now it has been reverted back to the normal homepage that we used to get. Because what happens is it is not able to find this particular page. So basically it is able to find the page, but there is a condition that page is visible or not. So since the page is not visible, it's not displayed with this if section, but it goes to the else part where the normal template is being rendered. Now there are multiple options when we are talking about visibility of this particular page. So here you can see, if you go to the page settings section, the first tab is general tab, which tells you about the basic information like ID and what is the type of this particular page. Localization allows you to configure the page in like different locales as well. Targeting is actually the section which allows you to decide the visibility of this particular page. So it could be possible that you want this page to be restricted to a certain number of users. Maybe you just want to display this particular page to only your registered users, or it could be based on like either the customer groups or the campaigns or promotions that you have, or it could be scheduled as well. So for certain dates, if you want to display this page, so that is how the targeting works. And based on these attributes, whatever we define here, it basically goes to this function like page is visible. So it takes multiple factors into consideration, like the customer who's visiting the website, also the dates if there has been any active promotion of the campaign. So there are multiple things that it considers, and based on that it decides whether the page should be visible or not, and that's how the page gets rendered. So this is the basic idea of how we can define the page in the page designer and how that gets rendered. Now when we talk about developing this components, so let's start with the basics. Let's start with the page first. So as soon as you click on the new, you get three options, like either you want to have a PDP, PLP, or the storefront page. So this is basically coming from the code itself. Like this has been developed by the development team, and based on that the BM is fetching the values. Now if you go back to, okay, first of all, whatever we see on the in the page designer module, it's coming directly from the experiences folder in the base cartridge. Now in the experience, if you go to the page section, there are three type of pages, and when we talked about defining either the page type or the component type, there are three things we need to make sure of. First is the meta file, the JSON. Second is the scripting, which is your JS. Third is rendering, which is the template. So here you can see we have, if we talk about the storefront page, like the normal storefront page, the home page that we created. So if you go to the store page.json, here you can see this particular structure tells you. So this is basically for the server to understand what kind of information this can hold. So you can see this is the storefront. There are multiple attributes that we are seeing in the JSON. There are certain attributes which are actually mandatory for this. Like you need to have a region definition for any page. And yeah, I think a region definition is the only thing which is mandatory. So for instance, if we talk about the storefront page, if I'll go back and open the home page, when we talked about this page structure, here you can see it has three different regions. These regions are defined in this particular JSON file, where you can see the header banner. This is the header banner region. Then comes your main region, and then comes your legal notice text. These are the three regions which are defined in the JSON for pages. Now inside this, you see it tells you about how many components you can define. So max component 1 means only one component can be added here. And if you want to have multiple components, you can simply skip this attribute. So for instance, in the second section, you are not seeing this attribute like max components. That's why if you go here, first section has a maximum of one component. Third section as well. Legal notice, you can see maximum component 1. Main section can have as many components as we need, so there's no limitation on this. Now comes the third parameter, which is your component type exclusion. Now this basically tells the system that these components should not be part of this particular region. Like any of these components cannot be configured for header banner region. And what are these? These are basically the list of all the components, most of the components that you don't want to be part of header banner. Now this is sometimes needed when you want to create some page and you have a very restricted scope of that particular region, that you cannot have any data there. The only specific component will be part of that. So in that cases, in order to restrict the merchandisers or the designers from configuring something incorrectly, you can define these exclusions. And similarly, you can also specify what kind of content can be included. So for instance, the last component, legal notice, it says it can have inclusion of this particular component only. So if we go back and if I try to add any component here, you'll see only one component I can see here, which is of type text box. And contrary to that, if I go to main region, I click on plus, there's a list of components that we can add here. Also, if you go to header banner section, you'll see again the scope of the component is very limited. So this scope is decided by the JSON file that we have. This JSON tells the server about the structure of page that we want to create. Now, since we are talking about the JSON, let's cover the component JSON as well at the same time, because most of the fields that we are seeing will remain the same, but only certain fields are there are multiple other fields which are mandatory when we are talking about the components. For instance, as for the first section, we have used, okay, let's not talk about the first section. We'll start with main banner. So main banner section. Now, if we go back to the commerce assets, and this is the main banner JSON. So you can see the name, description, these are the basic, like the trivial things. Group is something which is very important, and it's a mandatory field for the components. Reason being, the group that we decide or we define, it basically, this group is only used when we are configuring the values for inclusions or exclusions. So if we go back to the store page.json, you'll find that the component type exclusion is, first thing is your group ID, and after that, whatever the name of the component is. So that's how the system understands. It is able to relate that, okay, this is particular, this particular component belongs to which particular group. So that's where the group becomes mandatory. After that, we have this attribute definition group. Now, attribute definition group is basically, so you remember when we go back and we click on this particular component, here you see on the right side, we have multiple attributes like the banner image, text overlay, and the shop link. So this is where that data is coming from. The first section is your banner image, this one, then the text overlay and the shop now link. So these are the three sections which are coming directly from the JSON file. And you can also define the type of that particular attribute. For instance, this banner image, the definition actually tells us about the like what kind of data type could be used and whether that's a required field or not. So you can see the banner image has like this attribute definition with the type of image. Similarly, text overlay will hold the markup, and it's basically a category link. And you can notice that required is true for all of them. So it's like all three of them are required. Now, one more thing which is mandatory for this is the region definitions. So if you remember, we talked about this particular section where the component itself can hold a region, and inside the region we can have other components as well. So this is basically known as the nesting of your components. So Salesforce allows to have a nesting of components inside regions or regions inside components, but there's a limitation, and that is we cannot have more than 5 level of nesting. And when we are counting the level of nesting, the outermost container, like your page, is not included in that. So the counting starts region onward. So let's say this region has this component, and then further region, and inside that we have components. So the nesting could be more, no, should not be more than 5 levels. So coming back to the component JSON file, region definition is one of the mandatory fields. If you want to define the regions, you can do it. If not, then it should be a blank area. So right now you can see it. Okay. Now, as we have already covered that, like the metadata. Now the second thing comes is the logic behind what to do with this meta. So server needs to understand, like, okay, I have the meta. Now we need a logic for the server to understand it, what exactly needs to be done. So what we need to do is, along with the JSON, we need to have a JS file, which is the source script, and just make sure that the name of both the files are exactly the same. So here you can see store page.js. Only the extension changes, the rest of the fields remains the same. Now, mostly when we are talking about any of the scripts, you'll find there's a render function, and inside the render function, it takes 2 arguments. Usually takes 2 arguments. You can update it and have as many arguments as you want. First is your context, and second is your model in. Now, what it basically does is, based on the context, it tries to fetch different values. So if you select the context dot content is basically the entire content that we have. Like it's basically a section of your header banner, your main, and the legal notice. So whatever this structure that we have decided in the JSON file, your meta file, that is in your context dot content. So if we go further in this, So you can see context. So context basically has multiple other things as well, and it's a very useful argument that the render function has, and it has access to most of the information uh, belonging to your store page. So inside it, you'll find what exactly it does is it basically calls a hook. If you are opening that in an edit mode, let's not talk about the edit mode right now, but just to give you an overview of what exactly is happening is, so store page.json will always return a new template, and this template will be always in a textual format, and it's needed. Why it is needed is that whenever, so right now we are talking about a simple example of homepage where we have defined only these many components. It could be possible that you have a very complex page, and inside which you want to have multiple components in the main region, and you have like components, your header banner as well as legal notice. Now the page needs to understand the way you have defined that in the page designer, like this drag and drop tool. It should display the same way on the storefront as well. So what it does is it basically, based on every single component that you use, it returns the structure, like the complete HTML structure in textual format, and the sequence in which it has been defined in this drag and drop tool. In the same sequence, it returns that textual data to the server, which the server again translates into the normal HTML form, and that way it tries to keep it in the same sequence. Too much of technical detail, let's not go deep into that right now, but the basic understanding is, whenever you are talking about any, if you are creating a new page, the script file that you will be having will have a render function inside which you will be returning a template in textual format. So you can see it's basically returning this store page template, and it's rendering the model inside that. So it's being passed as an argument, and the text, like the textual format of this particular template, is being returned. Now this is basically the third component when we talked about this, like page type or the component type. So meta we have talked about, scripting we have talked about, now talking about the rendering part. So this is the template, the XML template will be there, and here you can see what exactly it does is it uses assets, add class. Assets are not the content assets. These are basically a way for Commerce Cloud to understand like what type of script that needs to be included on this particular page. We don't worry much about this part because we'll be covering it as part of the coding section, but right now just focus on what this is returning. So store page.isml has two different rows in which it's basically referring to the regions. So here you can see the first section is coming from like it's returning the main region in which we have defined this particular section. Second one is returning your legal notice section, which we haven't yet configured actually. The header banner region, if you can see, it's above the header part. So this is the header navigation, the header section. Above that, it is there. So that must have been coming from your decorator file, which is your PD storage. Okay, you can see it's basically calling a hook. Let's not talk about hook at all right now, but just give you a simple overview of like how the page is defined. First is your meta, scripting, and the rendering. So just try to keep all three the same named, only the extension should change. And we need to define the meta with the like JSON, scripting with the JS, and your template with the XML format. And once you have done that, what the system does is, so if you create a new component, the component will be listed here based on the group that you decide. So right now, if you go to the commerce layouts, you find these many components are there. The same are coming from your code. So if we go back to, yeah, here it is. So we have 4 components here: assets, layout, dynamic, and Einstein. Here as well, you will find 4 grouping: assets, layouts, dynamic, and the Einstein. And similarly, if you go back to the pages, we have basically three type of pages decided and defined here: listing page, details page, as well as the store page. And the type of pages was the first thing that we got when we clicked on new. So these are the only two components that we need to only two entities that you need to focus on, like the page type as well as the component type. How exactly this is getting rendered on storefront, and what exactly that the server module does with all this information. Like we have a server module which is basically responsible for most of the work in reference architecture. Like everything happens with the help of server modules only. So how exactly server module understands these values like JSON, JS, ISMLs, and the logic, and how does it translate that ISML and renders it? So how does the web adapter and the components work? So that is something which we will be talking about deeply in further videos. But for this one, let's have a like brief overview of what exactly page designer is, and how can we like configure this and how can we use it. That's it for today's video. I hope it was helpful to understand the page designer part. If you guys have any questions or concerns, please reach out to sfcc.queries@gmail.com, or you can also post your comments on the video itself. Thank you.